It was just another quiet evening in the sprawling manor, until someone completely unexpected arrived. Amara's day had been like any other, full of endless chores and quiet sighs. At just 17 years old, she had already learned to keep her head down and her hands busy, dusting ornate shelves and polishing silverware that gleamed under the glow of chandeliers. The estate's grand halls, with their heavy drapes and marble floors, felt more like a museum than a home. Follow the whole story and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave your opinion below in the comments section. It motivates us to share more impactful stories. Her life as a maid was one of routine. Wake before dawn, worked until exhaustion, sleep when the house finally quieted down. The only sound now was the faint ticking of the grandfather clock in the parlor. Amara was about to clear the last tray from the dining room when the sharp knock at the door startled her. Visitors at this hour? The butler, Mr. Lawrence, shuffled to the door, muttering under his breath. Amara peeked from the shadows as he opened it, and her heart skipped a beat. The man standing there was instantly recognizable. Elon Musk. She'd seen his face in magazines and on TV, always talking about space, electric cars, or something too complex for her to fully grasp. What on earth was he doing here? His presence seemed almost surreal against the backdrop of the old southern estate. "Mr. Musk," Lawrence said, his tone betraying a mix of surprise and annoyance. "We weren't expecting you." "I'm sorry for dropping in unannounced," Elon replied, his voice calm yet commanding. "I was passing through and thought I'd pay Mr. Collins a visit." The name sent a chill down Amara's spine. Mr. Collins, the estate's owner, was a wealthy and stern man known for his short temper and strong opinions. His politics were as old-fashioned as the furniture in his drawing room. Amara watched as Elon stepped inside, his presence commanding attention without effort. Dressed casually in a jacket and jeans, he looked out of place among the velvet and gold accents of the manor. For the rest of the evening, Amara went about her tasks while stealing glances at the guest. Unlike the other men who frequented the estate, Elon didn't bark orders or demand endless drinks. He carried himself with quiet focus, speaking to Mr. Collins about projects Amara couldn't understand but found intriguing. Yet, not everyone seemed impressed. "That man thinks he can change the world," she overheard one of the kitchen staff whisper. "But he's just another billionaire playing God." Amara said nothing, but she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to him than the headlines suggested. Amara hadn't planned to eavesdrop, but the voices in the study drew her closer than she knew was wise. The evening dragged on as Mr. Collins and Elon Musk conversed in the study. Amara, busy clearing plates in the adjacent dining room, couldn't help but overhear snippets of their conversation. "You're wasting your time," Mr. Collins said, his voice gruff with disdain. "All these ideas of yours, electric cars, space colonies, they're nothing but dreams." "And yet, dreams have a way of becoming reality," Elon replied, his tone steady. There was a brief silence, followed by the sound of a glass being set down forcefully. Amara tensed. She'd worked in the Collins household long enough to know what came next when Mr. Collins didn't like what he heard. "I'll tell you what's real," Mr. Collins growled. "This country was built on tradition, on hard work, not chasing after fantasies. People like you think you can rewrite the rules, but you'll see. You'll hit a wall eventually." Amara couldn't help herself. She moved closer, her heart pounding as she strained to hear Elon's response. "That's exactly why I do what I do," he said firmly. "Because the world needs progress. And progress doesn't come from holding on to the past. It comes from daring to build a better future." Amara's breath caught. She'd never heard anyone speak to Mr. Collins like that, with calm confidence instead of fear or submission. Later that evening, as the guests retired, Amara found herself tidying up the study. Elon was still there, sitting by the fireplace, his gaze fixed on the flickering flames. She hesitated, unsure whether to approach, but then he looked up and smiled gently. "You don't have to rush," he said. "Take your time." His words startled her, not because of what he said, but because of how he said it. No one in this house ever spoke to her with such kindness. "Thank you, sir," she murmured, quickly gathering the empty glasses. "What's your name?" he asked, his tone casual but curious. She froze for a moment before replying, "Amara, sir." That's a beautiful name, he said. Amara, how long have you worked here? Almost 2 years, she replied cautiously. Since I was 15. He nodded thoughtfully. And do you like it? Amara hesitated. It was the first time anyone had ever asked her that. It's a job, she said carefully. It helps my family. I see. He leaned back in his chair, studying her for a moment. You seem like someone who has a lot to offer, Amara. Her cheeks warmed at the compliment. She wasn't used to being noticed, let alone praised. Before she could reply, the door to the study burst open, and Mr. Collins stormed in. Amara, he barked. What are you doing lingering here? Get back to the kitchen. Amara's heart sank as she scurried out of the room, avoiding Elon's gaze. But as she left, she caught a glimpse of his expression, calm yet firm, as if he wasn't intimidated by Mr. Collins' outburst. Back in the kitchen, Amara replayed the exchange in her mind. There was something different about Elon Musk, something that made her believe he wasn't just another wealthy man passing through. What did Elon Musk see in Amara, and how will their paths cross again? Stay tuned for the next chapter. Leave a comment below with your predictions. The dining room had never felt so suffocating, but tonight, Amara couldn't stay silent. The following evening, the manor was alive with activity. Guests had arrived for one of Mr. Collins' lavish dinners, filling the grand dining room with laughter and chatter that seemed to echo endlessly. Amara moved quietly among the tables, refilling glasses and clearing plates, her presence barely acknowledged by the well-dressed attendees. Elon Musk was there again, seated at the far end of the table. His casual demeanor contrasted sharply with the stiff formality of the other guests. Though he engaged politely in conversation, Amara could tell he wasn't entirely at ease. The topic of discussion shifted to technology and innovation, and it wasn't long before the conversation grew heated. I just don't see the point, one of the guests scoffed, gesturing with his wine glass. Electric cars, AI, it's all just a way for people like you to make more money. Another chimed in. And don't even get me started on that nonsense about colonizing Mars. Fix Earth first before you go playing God. The room filled with murmurs of agreement. Elon remained calm, his gaze steady as he replied, I understand your concerns, but progress doesn't wait for perfection. If we don't innovate, we stagnate. And stagnation is far more dangerous. Spoken like a true billionaire, someone sneered. The tension in the room was palpable, and Amara felt a knot form in her stomach. She knew better than to intervene. But something about the way Elon stood his ground, even in the face of hostility, struck a chord deep within her. When Mr. Collins joined in, his tone was laced with contempt. You think you're better than the rest of US, don't you, Musk? Always chasing your next big idea while looking down on people who live in the real world. Amara froze, her grip tightening on the tray she was holding. She knew Mr. Collins well enough to recognize the venom in his voice. Elon didn't flinch. It's not about being better, he said calmly. It's about using what you have to make a difference. As the room erupted in laughter and mockery, Amara felt her frustration boil over. Before she could stop herself, she stepped forward. That's enough. The room fell silent as every eye turned to her. Amara's hands trembled, but she held her ground. You don't have to agree with him, she said, her voice steady despite the pounding of her heart. But at least listen to what he's saying. He's trying to make the world better, and all you're doing is tearing him down. Gasps rippled through the room, followed by an oppressive silence. Mr. Collins stood, his face dark with anger. Amara, he said, his voice low and dangerous. You forget your place. She turned to him, her chin lifted defiantly. I know my place, sir. And I know it's not right to mock someone who's trying to do good. Elon watched the exchange with a mix of surprise and admiration. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Mr. Collins' voice cut through the silence like a knife. You're fired. Pack your things and leave by morning. Amara's breath caught, but she refused to let her tears fall. Instead, she turned and left the room, her head held high. Amara hadn't slept a wink, and as the first rays of sunlight crept into the servants' quarters, she braced herself for an uncertain future. The small, dimly lit room Amara called her own was more a closet than a proper bedroom. It was sparsely furnished, A single bed, a battered dresser, and a small window that barely let in light. Her few belongings were already packed in a worn leather bag, sitting at the foot of the bed. She sat on the edge of the mattress, her hands folded tightly in her lap. The events of the previous night replayed in her mind on an endless loop. Standing up to Mr. Collins had been instinctive, but now she questioned the cost of her actions. What would she do? Where would she go? Her stomach churned as the weight of her decision sank in. She hadn't even told her mother yet. Her family depended on her small earnings to help make ends meet. The thought of disappointing them filled her with shame. As the morning light grew stronger, a knock at her door startled her. She stood abruptly, clutching the bag as though preparing to leave before someone could forcibly remove her. "Come in," she said, her voice hoarse from lack of sleep. To her shock, it was Elon Musk standing in the doorway. "Good morning," he greeted, his voice warm but laced with concern. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. Amara blinked, her surprise rendering her temporarily speechless. "Mr. Musk? I hope I'm not intruding," he said, glancing around the small room. "I asked one of the staff where I could find you." She set her bag down, her hands trembling slightly. "What are you doing here? Shouldn't you be with the others?" Elon smiled faintly. "Something told me I'd find you here." He paused, his expression growing serious. "I wanted to thank you for what you said last night." Amara shook her head, a rueful smile tugging at her lips. "And look where it got me. Fired. What good did it do?" "It did a lot of good," he said firmly. "You spoke up when no one else would. That takes courage, Amara. Not many people have that." She looked down, her face flushing with both gratitude and embarrassment. "But now I don't have a job. I don't even know where I'll go." Elon studied her for a moment, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small card. "I might be able to help with that." Amara hesitated before taking the card. She read the elegant lettering, X Foundation, for Innovation and Community Development. "What's this?" she asked, her brow furrowing. "Our foundation is always looking for people who are passionate, who want to make a difference," Elon explained. "It's not glamorous work, but it's meaningful. I think you'd be a great fit." Amara's heart skipped a beat. "You're offering me a job?" "I'm offering you a chance," he corrected gently. "It's up to you whether you take it." She stared at the card, disbelief washing over her. A chance. Not just at a job, but at a future she'd never dared to imagine. Before she could reply, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed down the hallway. Mr. Collins appeared in the doorway, his face twisted in a mixture of anger and disbelief. "What are you doing here?" he demanded, his gaze darting between Amara and Elon. "This is private property, Mr. Musk. You have no business being in the servants' quarters." Elon turned to face him, his expression calm but firm. "I came to speak with Amara. I wanted to thank her for her kindness." "Kindness?" Mr. Collins scoffed. "She's no longer an employee here, so I suggest you leave her to her packing." Elon's jaw tightened, but he kept his composure. "That's unfortunate. I believe people should be rewarded for their integrity, not punished for it." Amara held her breath, watching the tense exchange. Mr. Collins sneered. "I run my household as I see fit, Mr. Musk. And if you know what's good for you, you'll leave before you meddle further." Elon took a step closer, his voice low but resolute. "I'm not the kind of person who walks away when I see injustice, Mr. Collins. Maybe you should reconsider how you treat the people who work for you." The silence that followed was deafening. Mr. Collins glared at Elon, but the billionaire didn't waver. Finally, with a huff of indignation, Mr. Collins turned on his heel and stormed away. Elon turned back to Amara, his expression softening. "The offer still stands. Think about it." He left the room, leaving Amara standing there, the card clutched tightly in her hand. For the first time in what felt like forever, hope flickered in her chest. Amara's world is changing faster than she ever imagined. But will she take Elon's offer and step into the unknown? Find out in the next chapter. Don't forget to leave your thoughts below and share this story with someone who inspires you. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Amara found herself caught between fear and hope, each pulling her in opposite directions. The card in her hand felt heavier than it should have, as though it carried the weight of every choice she'd ever have to make. Amara sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the words printed on it. X Foundation. The name sounded grand, but the possibilities it represented seemed almost too far-fetched to believe. Elon Musk's visit replayed in her mind, each word he'd spoken resounding with quiet conviction. It's up to you whether you take it. She wanted to believe it was that simple, to take a leap of faith and trust that something better awaited her. But the reality of her circumstances loomed like a shadow. Leaving her position here, however unfairly it ended, meant abandoning what little stability she had. Her family depended on her income, meager as it was. Could she risk trading the known for the unknown? The door creaked open, and Ruby stepped in, her younger sister's wide eyes scanning the room. Amara, what's going on? Mama said Mr. Collins was yelling earlier. Did something happen? Amara hesitated, not wanting to worry Ruby, but the girl's curious gaze left no room for evasion. She sighed and patted the spot on the bed beside her. Ruby plopped down, her braids bouncing as she studied her sister's face. You look worried. Amara forced a smile. It's just, I stood up for someone last night. Mr. Collins didn't like it, so he's letting me go. Ruby's eyes widened. He fired you? But you didn't do anything wrong. I spoke out when I should have stayed quiet, Amara admitted, her voice tinged with regret. At least, that's how Mr. Collins sees it. Ruby crossed her arms, her small face set in defiance. Well, he's wrong. You always stand up for what's right. That's what Mama taught us. Amara chuckled softly, pulling her sister close. It's not always that simple, Ruby. Sometimes doing the right thing comes with consequences. Ruby frowned, then noticed the card in Amara's hand. What's that? Amara hesitated, then handed it over. Ruby studied it, her eyes lighting up. Is this a job? Did Mr. Musk give this to you? Yes, Amara admitted. He said there might be a place for me at his foundation. Ruby's mouth dropped open. That's amazing. Are you going to take it? I don't know, Amara replied honestly. It's a big step, and if it doesn't work out, I don't know what we'll do. Ruby shook her head vigorously. Amara, you can't let fear stop you. Mr. Musk is a big deal. If he thinks you can do this, then you can. Mama always says you're the bravest person she knows. Ruby's words stayed with Amara long after her sister left the room. They echoed in her mind as she finished packing her bag, each fold and tuck a silent acknowledgement that her time in this house had come to an end. She took one last look around the room. It had been her refuge for years, but now it felt more like a cage. The thought of leaving terrified her, but the thought of staying and letting this opportunity slip away felt worse. Her mother's voice drifted down the hallway, calling her to breakfast. Amara tucked the card into her pocket and walked out, determined to face her family with honesty. The small kitchen was filled with the aroma of cornmeal porridge and fried plantains. Her mother, a strong-willed woman with tired eyes, looked up as Amara entered. Ruby sat at the table, her excitement barely contained. Good morning, Mama, Amara greeted, her voice steady despite the nervous flutter in her chest. Morning, baby, her mother replied, stirring the pot on the stove. Ruby told me Mr. Collins was upset. What happened? Amara sat down, clasping her hands together. Mama, I need to tell you something. Her mother turned, a concerned look on her face. What is it? I lost my job, Amara said, her words heavy. Mr. Collins let me go because I defended someone last night, a guest. Her mother's expression hardened, but not in anger toward her daughter. That man has no sense of justice, she said, shaking her head. You've given him nothing but loyalty, and this is how he repays you? It's not just about that, Amara added, pulling the card from her pocket. Mr. Musk offered me a position at his foundation. It's a chance to do something different, something bigger, but I don't know if I should take it. Her mother came over, wiping her hands on her apron as she sat down beside her. She took the card, examining it closely. Amara, she began, her voice soft but firm. You've always been the one to dream big, even when life tried to hold you back. If this is an opportunity to follow those dreams, you owe it to yourself to try. Amara felt tears prick her eyes. But what if I fail, Mama? What if I make things worse for us? Her mother reached out, cupping her face. You won't fail. And even if things don't work out, you'll find another way. You always do. You're stronger than you think, Amara. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Amara made her way to the front of the estate, her bag slung over her shoulder. Elon Musk's car waited at the gate, its sleek black frame gleaming under the fading light. She hesitated for only a moment before climbing inside. The car glided through the city streets, its quiet hum amplifying the noise in Amara's mind as she braced herself for the unknown. Sitting in the luxurious back seat of Elon Musk's car, Amara's nerves were a tangled mess. The soft leather beneath her felt foreign, as if she were intruding on a world she didn't belong to. Elon sat across from her, his expression calm yet observant, as if he could sense her unease but chose not to comment on it. Are you nervous? He asked suddenly, breaking the silence. Amara blinked, startled by his directness. A little, she admitted, wringing her hands. This is different for me. Elon offered a small smile. Different isn't always bad. Sometimes it's the first step towards something better. His words hung in the air as the car pulled up to a sleek glass building downtown, its facade reflecting the city lights. Amara's breath caught at the sight. It was unlike anything she'd ever seen. Modern, towering, and intimidating. This is it, Elon said, stepping out of the car and motioning for her to follow. Inside, the building was a hive of activity. People in sharp suits and polished shoes bustled about, their conversations a mix of technical jargon and casual laughter. Amara felt out of place in her simple dress, but she straightened her back, determined not to let her insecurities show. As they entered a conference room, a group of people turned to greet them. Elon introduced her to a few team members, project managers, foundation coordinators, and communications experts. Each of them extended warm smiles and handshakes, their friendliness putting her slightly at ease. This is Amara, Elon said. She's joining us as part of the community outreach team. She brings a unique perspective we could all benefit from. Amara's cheeks flushed at the compliment. The team exchanged approving nods, though she noticed a few curious glances, as if they were trying to piece together how someone like her had ended up here. The first few hours were a whirlwind. Amara was shown her workspace, a bright and inviting desk near a window with a view of the city skyline. She was given an overview of the Foundation's projects, education initiatives, disaster relief programs, and local community support efforts. Despite the overwhelming information, Amara found herself captivated. This wasn't just a job, it was a chance to make a real difference. But as the day progressed, doubts began to creep in. Everyone around her seemed so confident, so polished. She wondered if she could truly measure up to their standards. Later that afternoon, Elon stopped by her desk. How are you settling in? He asked. It's a lot to take in, Amara admitted. I'm not sure if I'm ready for all this. Elon leaned against the edge of her desk, his tone reassuring. No one ever feels ready for something new. But you wouldn't be here if I didn't think you had what it takes. His confidence in her was both comforting and intimidating. Amara nodded, determined to prove him right, even if she didn't fully believe in herself yet. As the day wound to a close, Amara found herself alone in the break room, staring out at the city lights. She thought of her family, especially Ruby. The memory of her sister's excitement gave her a small boost of courage. This was her chance to break free from the limitations that had held her back for so long. She wasn't just working for herself, she was paving the way for a better future for those she cared about. With that thought, she stood taller, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Amara's fingers trembled as she typed her first email, the weight of her new responsibilities bearing down on her like an unseen force. It had been less than 24 hours since Amara stepped into the Foundation's sleek offices, and already, she felt like she was on a tightrope. The tasks before her seemed both exciting and insurmountable, drafting community outreach plans, responding to inquiries from local organizations, and coordinating logistics for an upcoming event. Elon's Foundation wasn't just a charity. It was a well-oiled machine that demanded precision and innovation. Amara had always been quick to learn, but this was a level of professionalism she had never encountered. Need help? A voice broke through her concentration. Amara looked up to see Zoe, a bubbly young woman with vibrant curls and an easy smile. She was one of the coordinators who had introduced herself yesterday. Maybe, Amara admitted, her cheeks warming. I'm trying to respond to this email, but I don't want to mess it up. Zoe laughed lightly. Don't overthink it. You've got this. Just be yourself. That's probably why Elon hired you in the first place. Her words eased some of the tension in Amara's chest. With Zoe's guidance, the email was soon polished and sent, giving Amara a small but satisfying victory. As the day went on, Amara began to find her rhythm. Tasks that had initially seemed daunting now felt more manageable, especially with the support of her new colleagues. Yet, a part of her couldn't shake the feeling that she was an outsider in this world. At lunch, she sat alone in the break room, nibbling on a sandwich she'd packed from home. The chatter around her was lively, filled with discussions about upcoming projects and the latest tech innovations. She listened intently, wishing she could contribute but unsure of what to say. You're quiet, a familiar voice said. Amara looked up to see Elon standing nearby, his plate balanced casually in one hand. She hadn't expected to see him here, mingling like an ordinary team member. I didn't want to interrupt, she said, shrugging. He sat across from her, his expression thoughtful. You should speak up. Your perspective is valuable, Amara. That's why you're here. Her heart fluttered at his words, but doubt still lingered. It's just, I don't want to say the wrong thing. Elon leaned forward slightly, his tone firm yet encouraging. No one gets everything right all the time. But staying silent is the only way to ensure your voice isn't heard. After lunch, Amara resolved to push past her insecurities. When a brainstorming session for a new community program began, she hesitated only for a moment before raising her hand. I was thinking, she started, her voice shaky but growing steadier with each word, that maybe we could partner with local schools to create workshops on financial literacy. It's something a lot of people in my neighborhood struggle with, especially young adults. The room went quiet as the team absorbed her suggestion. Then, to her surprise, several heads nodded in agreement. That's a fantastic idea, said Zoe, smiling at her. Elon, who had been listening quietly, added, it's practical, impactful, and aligns perfectly with our mission. Let's explore it further. Amara felt a surge of pride. For the first time, she began to believe that she could contribute meaningfully to this team. As the day wound down, Amara sat at her desk, reflecting on how far she'd come in such a short time. She still had much to learn, but for the first time, she felt like she belonged. Before leaving, she received an email from Elon himself. Great work today. Keep it up. You're making a difference already. Her heart swelled at the simple yet affirming message. Not everyone in the office was thrilled about the newest addition to Elon Musk's foundation. Amara's second week at the foundation started with a mix of determination and unease. While many of her colleagues had been supportive, she couldn't ignore the subtle glances and hushed whispers that followed her down the hall. You know, they say she just stumbled into this job because Elon felt sorry for her, she overheard one woman say as she walked past the break room. She's just a kid, another voice replied. What does she even know about running programs like this? Amara paused, her hand tightening on the strap of her bag. The words stung, but she forced herself to keep walking. She didn't want to give them the satisfaction of knowing she'd heard. Later that morning, during a team meeting, she presented her ideas for the financial literacy workshops. Elon had personally encouraged her to develop the concept, and she'd spent hours refining the details. This program will target underserved communities, she explained, her voice steady despite the tension in the room. We'll focus on practical skills like budgeting, saving, and understanding credit. I believe it could have a real impact. As she finished, there was a moment of silence. Zoe was the first to speak, her voice full of enthusiasm. I think it's brilliant. This is exactly the kind of initiative we need. But not everyone shared her sentiment. Doesn't this seem a bit ambitious? Said Mark, one of the senior team members. He leaned back in his chair, his tone dripping with skepticism. We're already stretched thin as it is. Adding another program might spread us too far. Amara's heart sank, but she refused to back down. I understand your concern, she replied, keeping her tone measured. But I believe this program could attract new donors and partners, which would help alleviate some of the strain. Mark didn't look convinced, but before he could respond, Elon spoke up. Amara's right, he said, his voice cutting through the tension. This program aligns with our mission and has the potential to make a real difference. Let's move forward with it. The room fell silent again, and Amara felt a mix of relief and vindication. But as the meeting ended, she caught the cold glare Mark sent her way, and her unease returned. That afternoon, as she worked at her desk, Zoe stopped by with a cup of coffee. "Don't let Mark get to you," she said, setting the cup down with a reassuring smile. "He's like that with everyone, especially newcomers. But you're doing great." "Thanks," Amara replied, grateful for the encouragement. Zoe hesitated before adding, "Just be careful. Not everyone here is as open-minded as they seem. You've got Elon's support, but some people don't like how quickly you're making waves." Amara nodded, her resolve hardening. She wasn't about to let anyone intimidate her out of pursuing what she believed in. As the day ended, Amara lingered in the office, going over her plans for the workshop. The quiet allowed her to focus, but it also gave her time to reflect on the challenges ahead. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "How's the new job, sweetheart? We're all so proud of you." Amara smiled, her chest tightening with emotion. She thought about everything she'd overcome to get here and reminded herself that this was only the beginning. When she finally left the office, she stepped into the cool night air, feeling a renewed sense of determination. Amara had always known that success wasn't a straight path, but no one had warned her how lonely the journey would feel. The days blended together as Amara continued to settle into her new role at the foundation. She found herself constantly battling not just the pressure to succeed, but the subtle resistance from colleagues who viewed her as an outsider. Despite Elon's unwavering support, there were murmurs in the halls. Every project she proposed was met with skepticism, every idea scrutinized by those who had been there much longer than her. It wasn't overt hostility, but it was the cold silence that followed her efforts, the polite nods that never reached their eyes. It wasn't just Mark, but others, too. Susan, an associate director, would make dismissive comments during meetings, always offering an alternative perspective that seemed to undermine Amara's ideas. Even the interns, who were supposed to look up to her, would whisper behind her back. She began to dread the daily interactions, knowing that each word she spoke was weighed and measured, each suggestion questioned. But she couldn't stop. She couldn't let the whispers break her. One afternoon, as Amara was preparing for another meeting with Elon, she was pulled aside by Zoe, who looked unusually serious. "Hey, can I talk to you for a second?" Zoe asked, her voice low. Amara nodded, stepping away from her desk and following Zoe to a quiet corner of the office. "You've got to watch out for Susan," Zoe warned, her expression tight with concern. "She's been spreading rumors about you, saying you're only here because Elon feels sorry for you. She's trying to turn people against you." Amara's heart dropped, but she forced herself to stay calm. Why would she do that? Zoe hesitated. "It's not just about you. It's about her feeling threatened. You're bringing fresh ideas, and it's shaking things up. Some people don't like change. Just be careful. Watch your back." Amara nodded, feeling a wave of exhaustion wash over her. She had expected challenges, but this felt personal. Later that afternoon, she entered the conference room for her meeting with Elon. As she sat down, he greeted her with his usual friendly smile, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. "Amara, I've been hearing great things about the work you've been doing with the workshop," Elon said, his voice warm. "I'm really excited about the direction you're taking." "Thank you," Amara replied, trying to sound more confident than she felt. But before she could say anything more, Elon's tone shifted slightly. "There's just one thing I wanted to address. I've noticed some resistance from the team, some concerns about the pace of the projects and how quickly things are moving. I know you're passionate, but it's important to make sure we're all aligned." Amara's stomach twisted, but she forced herself to maintain eye contact. "I understand, Elon. I just want to make a difference. I believe in what we're doing here." "I know you do," Elon said, his voice softening. "But I need you to be strategic. If you push too hard, too fast, you could lose support." Take a step back. See how you can bring people with you rather than pushing them away. Amara nodded, but the words felt like a punch to the gut. She had been so focused on her vision, on the possibility of what they could achieve together, that she hadn't realized how much she was alienating the very people she needed to succeed. As the meeting wrapped up, Amara walked back to her desk, her mind racing. She had always believed in moving forward, in pushing boundaries. But now, she realized that success wasn't just about vision. It was about navigating the politics of the office, finding a balance between ambition and collaboration. It wasn't easy, but she knew she couldn't give up now. She had worked too hard to get here. That evening, she stayed late at the office, reviewing the workshop materials and trying to refine her approach. But as she looked at the clock, she realized it was past 9 p.m. The building was nearly empty. She grabbed her things and headed for the door, only to stop when she saw Elon's office lights still on. Curious, she knocked softly. "Come in," Elon's voice called from inside. Amara stepped into his office, finding him sitting at his desk, looking over some paperwork. "You're still here?" she asked, surprised. "I could ask you the same thing," Elon replied with a grin, "but I'm just going over a few things. What about you?" "I was working on the workshop, trying to make sure everything's perfect," Amara said, shrugging. Elon studied her for a moment, then leaned back in his chair. "You're determined. I like that. But remember, it's not all about perfection. Sometimes, it's about learning to adjust and read the room." Amara nodded slowly. "I'm trying. It's just hard. I'm not sure how to move forward without stepping on toes." Elon's expression softened. "You don't have to have all the answers right away. You're here because I believe in you. Just keep doing what you believe is right. But remember, you don't have to fight this battle alone." As she left the office that night, Amara felt a renewed sense of purpose. She had a lot to learn, and she knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. The weight of 1,000 silent judgments pressed down on Amara, but she had no choice but to carry it. The days following the meeting with Elon felt like a delicate balancing act for Amara. She tried to take his advice to heart, easing up on her aggressive push for change, but it was hard. She was used to fighting for what she believed in, pushing through obstacles. But now, it felt like every move she made was under a microscope. Her colleagues were watching her every step, their eyes narrowing with suspicion whenever she entered the room. Even the interns, who had once looked up to her, now exchanged wary glances when she walked by. Despite her attempts to adjust, the tension in the office grew, and every day, she felt it more deeply. That afternoon, as Amara worked quietly at her desk, trying to focus on the presentation she had to give later in the week, she heard footsteps approaching. It was Susan, again. "Hey, Amara," Susan said, leaning against the doorframe, a smirk playing at the corners of her lips. "Got a minute?" Amara looked up, forcing a smile. "Sure, what's up?" "I just wanted to let you know that I'm really impressed with how you're handling things around here," Susan said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "I mean, it's not every day you see someone get ahead by playing the 'I know Elon Musk' card. Must be nice, right?" Amara clenched her jaw but kept her voice steady. "I'm not here because of anyone else. I'm here because of my own work." Susan laughed, the sound harsh and grating. "Sure, whatever you say. But we all know how these things work." She turned to walk away, but paused. "Just don't forget where you came from." Amara's stomach churned, the weight of Susan's words settling like a stone in her gut. It wasn't just about the job. It was about the constant reminder that she wasn't fully accepted, no matter what she accomplished. After the encounter with Susan, Amara was too upset to focus on her work. She walked to the break room to get some coffee, trying to shake off the lingering anger. As she filled her cup, she didn't notice someone entering until they spoke. "You okay?" Amara turned to find Zoe standing by the door, looking concerned. "I'm fine," Amara said quickly, trying to brush off her feelings. "Just dealing with Susan." Zoe raised an eyebrow. "She really has it out for you, huh?" "Yeah. I don't know what her deal is." "You know, you don't have to take that from her," Zoe said, stepping forward. "You've earned your place here. Don't let her get to you." Amara smiled weakly, grateful for Zoe's support. "Thanks. I just..." I don't know how to handle it. I'm doing my best, but it feels like nothing is enough. Zoe nodded. I get it, but you've got more going for you than you realize. Don't let one person, or a few, make you feel small. Amara's heart warmed at Zoe's words. She hadn't expected this kind of support from anyone at work, but Zoe had become a quiet ally in the sea of indifference. Later that afternoon, as Amara was preparing for her next meeting, Elon stopped by her desk. His smile was warm, but there was something different in his eyes. Amara, he said, leaning against her desk, I've been thinking. I've noticed how hard you've been working. You're making progress, but I want to make sure you're not feeling alone in all of this. Amara looked up at him, surprised. What do you mean? I know the team can be a little difficult, Elon said, his voice quiet, but I've got your back. I don't want you to feel like you have to fight every battle by yourself. Her throat tightened at his words. She had always admired Elon for his vision, but hearing him say this made her realize how much he truly cared about her success, not just as an employee, but as a person. You've already given me so much, Amara said, her voice thick with emotion. I don't want to ask for more. You're not asking for more, Elon replied, his tone firm. You're asking for support, and that's what I'm here for. I want to see you succeed. Amara couldn't remember the last time she had felt this much trust in someone outside of her family. She had always been used to standing on her own, but now she realized that there was power in allowing others to help you, too. That evening, after work, Amara sat down with Zoe at a nearby coffee shop. You know, Zoe said, stirring her drink thoughtfully, maybe it's time to start thinking about your next big step. What do you mean? I mean, this job, this foundation. It's only the beginning for you, Amara. You've got a fire in you. Maybe it's time to start thinking about bigger goals, beyond the office. Amara leaned back in her chair, the idea taking root in her mind. What if Zoe was right? What if this was just the first chapter of something bigger, something she had only dreamed of before? I'm scared, Amara admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know if I'm ready for something that big. Zoe smiled. You don't have to be ready. You just have to believe in yourself. As Amara walked home that night, the weight of the day still heavy on her shoulders, she realized something. No matter how hard the struggle, no matter the setbacks, she couldn't let fear dictate her future. She had come this far, and she wasn't about to stop now. The offer came out of nowhere, and yet it felt like the answer to every question Amara had been asking herself. Amara had spent the morning in a haze, her mind still reeling from Elon's unexpected gesture of support the day before. She knew she had a big presentation to prepare for, but it was hard to focus. How could she think about anything else when everything in her life seemed to be shifting beneath her feet? But as the hours passed and the office began to wind down, she found herself in a quiet corner, working on her slides, when she received a call. It was Elon. Amara, I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time. Elon's voice crackled through the phone. She blinked in surprise. No, it's fine. What's up? I've been thinking a lot about what you said yesterday, Elon began. You mentioned that you wanted to make a difference, to be part of something bigger. And I think you've got the potential to do just that. There's an opportunity with the foundation that I want you to consider. Amara's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected this. This was something more than just a friendly gesture or a passing comment. What kind of opportunity? She asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Well, it's not a typical position. We're looking for someone to head up a new initiative we're launching, a project focused on community outreach and technology education for underrepresented groups. We need someone with your vision, someone who understands the importance of both sides of the equation. Amara couldn't believe what she was hearing. The project sounded like everything she had ever wanted, something that could merge her passion for technology with her desire to give back to the community. I don't know what to say, she stammered, her pulse racing. This is incredible, but I've never done anything like this before. You don't have to have all the answers yet, Elon reassured her. You just need to be willing to learn and grow with the project. The team will be there to support you, and I know you have the right instincts. The room seemed to fall away as she processed his words. This was it, the chance to make an impact, to do more than just follow the usual path. But was she ready? I think I would love to take on that challenge, Amara said, her voice trembling with excitement. "Thank you for thinking of me." "You've earned it, Amara," Elon replied. "I believe in you." After hanging up, Amara sat in silence for a few moments, trying to absorb the gravity of the offer. It was everything she had dreamed of, but now that it was real, she wasn't sure she was ready. She picked up her phone and dialed Zoe's number. "Zoe, I need to talk," Amara said, her voice shaky. "I'm here," Zoe replied immediately. "What happened?" Amara explained the offer Elon had made, her words tumbling out in a rush. By the time she finished, Zoe was quiet for a moment. "Amara, this is huge," Zoe said. "This is what you've been working for. Don't second-guess yourself. You can do this." "I don't know if I can," Amara admitted. "It feels so overwhelming." Zoe's voice was steady and firm. "You're not alone in this. You've got people who believe in you. Me, Elon, the team. You've got the skills, the heart, and the drive. You've already shown that. But what if I mess it up?" Amara whispered, her fear creeping in. "That's what growth is, Amara. Taking the leap and learning along the way. You'll figure it out. And I know you'll make it happen." Amara took a deep breath, feeling the weight of Zoe's encouragement settle over her. Maybe she wasn't ready, but maybe that was exactly why she had to take the risk. The next morning, Amara walked into the office with a new sense of purpose. Her mind was clearer now, the uncertainty starting to fade as she focused on the path ahead. She had a meeting with Elon later that afternoon to discuss the details of the project, and she was determined to make the most of this opportunity. When she sat down in Elon's office, he greeted her with a warm smile. "I'm glad you decided to take the leap, Amara," he said, his tone sincere. "We've got a lot to figure out, but I think you're the perfect person to lead this project." Amara smiled, her nerves beginning to settle. "I'm ready to give it my all. Let's do this." The meeting that followed was a whirlwind of ideas, strategies, and expectations. Amara found herself buzzing with excitement, jotting down notes as Elon outlined the vision for the project. He spoke about the long-term impact it could have, how it could change the lives of countless people, and how it could reshape the way communities engage with technology. For the first time in a long while, Amara felt like she was exactly where she needed to be. As she left the meeting, her heart racing with anticipation, she felt a sense of calm wash over her. She was nervous, yes, but she knew that this was her chance to create something meaningful. She wasn't just a 17-year-old maid anymore. She was a force to be reckoned with. This was only the beginning. It felt like the world had just tilted on its axis, and Amara was caught in the middle of it all, trying to figure out which way to go. The days after Amara accepted Elon's offer flew by in a blur. The weight of the decision had settled on her shoulders like a heavy cloak, and although she had never felt more nervous, there was an undeniable spark of excitement in her chest. This project could change everything for her, her career, her future, and maybe even the world. But the new reality was daunting. She had stepped into a world where every decision mattered, where her every move would be scrutinized, and where she had to prove that she was more than just the girl from the maid's quarters. Amara had always dreamed of making a difference, but now that the opportunity was staring her in the face, she wondered if she was truly ready for what lay ahead. That afternoon, she found herself standing in the lobby of the office building where the Foundation's headquarters was located. The sleek, modern space was intimidating, with its glass walls and polished floors that reflected the fluorescent lights above. She adjusted the strap of her bag and took a deep breath. This was the beginning of her new life, but it didn't feel quite real yet. When she stepped into the elevator, she wasn't alone. A group of suited professionals stood beside her, their conversation a blend of jargon and corporate lingo. Amara felt out of place in her simple blouse and jeans, but she straightened her back, reminding herself that she belonged here, too. As the elevator ascended, she felt the pressure building inside her chest. She had spent so many years looking up to people like Elon, admiring their confidence and ambition. But now, she was expected to lead a project of her own. Could she really pull it off? When the doors opened on the 12th floor, she was greeted by a receptionist with a warm smile. "Hi, you must be Amara. We've been expecting you." Her heart skipped a beat. "Yes, I am." "Great. Elon's waiting for you in the conference room," the receptionist said, pointing to a sleek door at the end of the hallway. Right through there. Amara nodded, trying to steady her nerves. As she walked down the hall, her mind raced. This was the moment that would define everything. She had to prove she was more than just the girl who once cleaned the rooms of rich strangers. She had a vision now, a vision that could change the course of her life and the lives of so many others. The conference room doors opened with a soft swish, and there, sitting at the head of the table, was Elon. He looked up and smiled when he saw her. "Amara, welcome." She hesitated for a moment, then walked over to him, her steps sure. "Thank you for giving me this chance," she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "I won't let you down." Elon motioned for her to sit. "I don't doubt it. We've got a lot to talk about today, but I want you to know that this is your project. I'm here to guide you, but the vision you create will be yours." Amara sat down, feeling the weight of his words sink in. This was real. She wasn't just a part of the team anymore. She was the one calling the shots. He leaned forward, his expression serious. "So, let's get into it. We're aiming to create a program that not only teaches underrepresented communities about technology, but also gives them the tools to innovate on their own. We'll start small, maybe a few pilot programs in select cities. But we want to expand it, make it accessible to as many people as possible." Amara's heart raced as she listened. It was everything she had hoped for, but hearing it in such concrete terms made her realize the gravity of what she was about to take on. She would be leading an initiative that could reshape the way people saw technology and the way technology impacted their lives. Elon continued, "We need to focus on accessibility, on breaking down the barriers that prevent people from even getting started. We also need to create a network, a community, that will support these people long after the program ends." Amara nodded, her mind already spinning with ideas. She could see it all in her head: workshops in community centers, hands-on training sessions, scholarships for those who showed real potential. The possibilities were endless. "I want to create a space where anyone, no matter their background, can feel like they belong," she said, her voice stronger now, more confident. "A place where people aren't just learning how to use technology, but learning how to shape it." Elon smiled. "Exactly. You're thinking in the right direction. But there's one more thing we need to consider: the funding and the partnerships. We can't do this alone. We need to get support from both tech companies and local governments. And that's where you come in." Amara blinked in surprise. "Me? I'm just getting started. I don't have those kinds of connections." "You will," Elon said firmly. "You've got a passion for this, Amara. And that's more important than any connection. You'll find the people who believe in this project, just like you do. And they'll help us take it to the next level." The conversation turned to logistics and next steps, but Amara couldn't help but feel a sense of pride swelling in her chest. She had been given the chance to make a real difference, to build something that would change lives. And it wasn't just a dream anymore. It was happening. The rest of the meeting flew by in a blur. Amara took notes, asked questions, and began to shape her plan. By the time the meeting wrapped up, her head was spinning with possibilities. But as she left the conference room, she felt a surge of hope. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't just surviving, she was thriving. Elon caught her before she left the building. "I know this is a lot to take in, but I believe in you, Amara," he said, his tone genuine. "You've got everything it takes to succeed here." She smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. "Thank you, Elon. I won't let you down." Amara had never felt so out of her depth, but as the first day on the job unfolded, she realized something. This was her chance to prove that she was capable of far more than she ever imagined. Amara woke up early that morning, her nerves getting the best of her as she stared at the pile of notes and ideas she had written down the night before. Today was her first official day leading the project, and although she had prepared herself for this moment, nothing could have prepared her for the weight of responsibility she now carried. She dressed carefully, no more simple clothes from her old life. She wore a blouse she'd bought with the little savings she had, a subtle nod to the fact that this was a new chapter in her life. As she applied her makeup, her hands shook. She hadn't been given this opportunity to fail. It was her time to shine. Amara had spent the past few days at the office, meeting the team and reviewing the materials Elon had given her. The foundation was doing great work, but it was clear that this new project, the one Amara would oversee, was going to take things to a whole new level. Today, they would launch the pilot phase. She had to prove that this idea was more than just a vision. It was something tangible, something that could change lives. When she arrived at the office, the place buzzed with activity. She had expected the usual hum of business, but this felt different. There was energy in the air, anticipation building. Amara walked through the open-plan office, smiling at the team members who greeted her. She had barely taken a seat at her desk when Elon walked in, his usual confident stride making its way toward her. "Ready for today?" Elon asked, his eyes bright with enthusiasm. Amara nodded, though she felt her stomach flip. "I think so. I've been working with the team on the first session for the pilot. I'm just nervous." Elon chuckled. "That's normal. But remember, it's not about being perfect, it's about making progress. We're doing something important here, something that hasn't been done before, and we're going to make it work." His words were reassuring, but they didn't stop the butterflies from fluttering in her stomach. Amara had always worked hard, but now it was all on her shoulders. The team gathered in the conference room for their morning briefing, and as Amara stood at the front, she could feel everyone's eyes on her. She had to give them direction. She had to give them a reason to believe in her and in the project. "This is the beginning of something big," she started, her voice a little shaky at first but growing stronger with each word. "We're not just offering tech education. We're giving people a chance to dream bigger, to imagine a future where they're not held back by the circumstances they were born into. This program will open doors for them, just like I'm being given this chance." There was a pause, and then one of the team members, a woman named Sarah, spoke up. "So, what's the first step? How do we get started?" Amara smiled, relieved that the question had come up. It meant people were invested in her plan. "First, we'll be focusing on creating a series of accessible workshops that introduce underrepresented communities to the basics of coding, digital literacy, and tech entrepreneurship. But we're not stopping there. We want them to build their own projects that solve real-world problems. This won't be just about learning. It'll be about creating." She could see the nods of approval around the table. Amara was proud of the team. They believed in her vision. But what came next was even more important. She had to connect with the community, with the people who needed this program the most. "I've been in touch with several community centers in different cities," Amara continued. "We'll launch the pilot in those locations first. I want to reach people who feel like technology is out of their grasp, people who don't see a place for themselves in this world. But we can change that. We can give them a platform." As she spoke, her confidence grew. This wasn't just a project, it was a movement. And she wasn't just leading it, she was living it. The pilot began with a small group of eager participants in one of the community centers. Amara watched nervously as the first session started. There was a mix of people in the room. Students, young adults, even older individuals who were looking to change careers. They all had one thing in common. They were looking for a chance, a way to step into a world that had been closed off to them. The instructor, a woman named Lena, was a seasoned tech professional who had transitioned from a similar background. She was the perfect person to lead the class, but even so, Amara couldn't help but feel the pressure. This first session had to go perfectly. As Lena started explaining the basics of coding, Amara noticed the focus in the room. These people were hungry to learn, their eyes wide with curiosity. There was an energy in the room that she hadn't expected, a hunger for knowledge, a desire to change. And it was in that moment that Amara realized how much this project meant. After the session, she approached one of the participants, a young man named Tyrone who had been asking questions the entire time. He seemed eager to learn, but also a little unsure of himself. "How's it going so far?" she asked, her voice kind. "It's amazing," Tyrone said, his voice filled with wonder. "I never thought I could do something like this. I always thought tech was for other people, not people like me. But now, I'm starting to think maybe I could do this for real." Amara smiled, feeling her heart swell. This was why she was here. This was why she had taken the leap. "You can," she said simply, "and we're going to help you get there." Later that afternoon, as Amara sat in her office, her phone buzzed with a message from Elon. "I heard great things about today. Keep it up. You're doing amazing." She stared at the words for a moment, feeling a rush of pride. For the first time in her life, she was leading something important. It was her chance to show the world, and herself, that she was more than just a girl from a poor neighborhood. She was a visionary, just like the people she admired. Amara's journey has only just begun, and the road ahead is filled with challenges. Will she be able to turn her vision into reality? What happens next will shape the future of the project and her life. Don't miss the next chapter, and be sure to subscribe and leave your thoughts in the comments below. Amara had always believed that change could start with a single spark, but as the pilot project gained momentum, she realized that it was not just a spark, it was an unstoppable fire. Amara couldn't sleep that night. The pilot had gone well, better than expected, and yet her mind refused to quiet down. She replayed every interaction, every moment of the day in her head. The participants had responded enthusiastically to the workshops, but that wasn't enough. It wasn't just about running successful classes or seeing smiles on their faces. It was about sustaining that enthusiasm, about showing them that this opportunity wasn't fleeting, it was permanent. She leaned against the window, gazing out at the city, the lights twinkling in the distance. Her phone vibrated on the table beside her, dragging her out of her thoughts. It was a message from Elon. Heard amazing things today. Big things are ahead. Let's meet tomorrow morning. I have an idea to discuss. Elon's words stirred something in her, a mix of excitement and apprehension. She had always been cautious about his ideas. They were always big, sometimes too big, but she knew she couldn't afford to dismiss them. The next morning, Amara arrived early at the office, her heart racing. Elon was already there, sitting at the head of the table, looking as calm and collected as ever. "Good morning, Amara," he said, his voice warm but purposeful. "I've been thinking about where we go from here. The pilot was a success, but I think it's time to take things to the next level." Amara sat down, her mind already spinning with possibilities. "What do you have in mind?" Elon leaned forward, his eyes shining with excitement. "We need to expand faster. You've seen the potential. These workshops could be the foundation of something huge, but we're limiting ourselves if we don't act quickly. What if we could bring in partners, big players in the tech industry? We could create a pipeline of talent, a new generation of tech leaders from communities that have been overlooked for too long. We need to build the kind of infrastructure that turns this into a movement." Amara blinked, absorbing the weight of his words. She had always dreamed of scaling the program, but the idea of reaching out to the tech giants, the very companies that had excluded people like her and the community she worked with, felt overwhelming. "Are you suggesting we partner with companies like Google or Microsoft?" she asked, her voice cautious. Elon nodded. "Exactly. And we'll offer them something they can't ignore: untapped talent, a new workforce. It'll be mutually beneficial. You bring the people. They provide the resources, the mentorship. We'll create an ecosystem of success." Amara's mind raced. It wasn't just a dream anymore. It was a real possibility. But she had concerns. She knew how big companies operated. They often took more than they gave, and their priorities were always about profit first. "I love the idea, but we need to be careful," she said, her voice firm. "We can't let these companies turn the program into something that benefits them at the expense of the people we're trying to help. This needs to be about giving them real opportunities, not just filling their quotas." Elon smiled, his confidence unshaken. "You're right. That's why we need to be strategic. I trust you to make sure we stay true to the mission. But we can't wait. We have to move quickly." Amara nodded slowly, her heart still racing. This could be the breakthrough they needed, but it came with a huge responsibility. The potential was enormous, but so were the risks. The next few weeks were a blur. Amara threw herself into preparing the pitch for the big tech companies. She worked closely with her team to refine the curriculum, ensuring it was both practical and impactful. They had to prove that the people they were training could not only excel in tech, but could also bring a fresh perspective to the industry, one that had been sorely lacking. Elon, ever the connector, made introductions to some of the top executives in the tech world. Amara felt like an imposter at times, sitting in rooms with people who had been in the industry for decades, but she pushed those thoughts aside. She wasn't here to be intimidated. She was here to change the game. The meetings were intense, the pressure mounting with each presentation. At times, it felt like Amara was speaking a different language than the executives across the table. They were used to numbers, statistics, and bottom lines. Amara was talking about people, real people, with dreams, with stories, with potential. And she had to make them see that investing in these communities wasn't just the right thing to do. It was a smart business move. By the time they reached the final pitch, Amara was exhausted. She'd spent hours preparing for every scenario, every tough question they could throw at her. But as she stood in front of a panel of executives from a major tech company, she knew that this was the moment. This was what she had been working toward. "We are not just creating workers," Amara said, her voice strong. "We are creating innovators. These people like Tyrone, people from communities that have been left behind, they are not just going to fill jobs. They are going to create the jobs of the future. They are going to lead this industry. And you have the chance to be part of that change." There was a long pause in the room. Amara held her breath, waiting for their response. Finally, one of the executives spoke. "I think you're right," he said slowly, his voice contemplative. "This isn't just about diversity quotas or meeting the numbers. This is about finding the next wave of talent, people who think differently, who have the drive to succeed. We're in." Amara's heart soared, but she didn't allow herself to show too much emotion. She had been prepared for this moment, but it was still surreal to hear the words. "We're in," the executive repeated. Later that evening, Amara sat alone in her office, staring at the contract they had signed. The tech giant was officially on board. The project was no longer just an idea, it was going global. But even as she celebrated the win, a small voice in the back of her mind reminded her of the challenge ahead. The real work was just beginning. They had gained access to the resources they needed, but now they had to deliver. They had to stay true to their mission. The fire had been lit. Now, it was up to Amara and her team to keep it burning. Amara's plan is starting to take shape, but with the power of big companies comes a new set of challenges. Will she be able to maintain the integrity of her mission while navigating this new world of business? The stakes have never been higher. Stay tuned for the next chapter, and don't forget to leave your thoughts and subscribe for more updates. As Amara stood before a crowd of eager faces, she realized that the next few moments would define not just her future, but the future of countless others. The announcement had been made. The partnership with one of the largest tech companies in the world was official. The emails were sent, the press releases distributed, and the world now knew that Amara's vision was no longer a dream. It was reality. But the exhilaration of the moment was short-lived. The weight of what she had promised began to settle heavily on her shoulders. The contracts were signed, the commitments made, but the true work had only just begun. She had always known that this was a pivotal moment in her career, but now that it was here, it felt like a massive leap into the unknown. Amara walked through the bustling halls of the headquarters, her mind a whirlwind of plans and considerations. The partnerships, the mentors, the pipelines for jobs, all of it needed to come together seamlessly. She had to make sure that every step taken was aligned with her vision, ensuring that the communities they were working with would not be exploited but empowered. She stopped in front of a large conference room where Elon was waiting for her. His presence was always reassuring, a steady reminder that, together, they had the power to accomplish almost anything. But as she entered, she noticed a different energy in the room. The usual confidence in Elon's demeanor was tempered by something Amara couldn't quite put her finger on. "You wanted to meet?" she asked, taking a seat across from him. Elon nodded, but didn't immediately speak. Instead, he placed a large stack of papers in front of her. "This is the revised proposal from the tech company. They've adjusted some of the terms, particularly around the ownership structure of the program." Amara frowned as she scanned the first page. The language was technical, full of legal jargon, but what stood out to her immediately was the section about control. The tech company was proposing a partnership that would shift some of the decision-making power into their hands. It wasn't just about resources anymore. It was about who had the final say. "Elon," Amara said carefully, "this wasn't part of the plan. We agreed that we would lead this, that the communities we're serving would have a voice." He leaned back in his chair, his hands steepled in front of him. "I know, but we're talking about scale here. The resources they're offering come with a price. They want more say in the direction of the program. It's part of the deal. Amara's heart sank. She knew the stakes, but this felt like a step too far. If they allowed this kind of control, they risked losing the very essence of what the program was about. The tech giants didn't see it as a movement. They saw it as a business venture, a means to profit from diversity. We can't just give them control, Amara said firmly. This is about empowerment, not about making them look good on paper. They want to help, fine. But they need to understand that they can't dictate the terms. We've worked too hard to let that slip away. Elon's expression hardened. Amara, I get it. But we're not going to get everything we want here. They've got the resources, the connections, the influence. If we don't meet them halfway, this deal won't happen. I don't think we have much room to negotiate. Amara paused, considering his words. Elon was right. Without the tech company's support, the program would remain small, a handful of workshops here and there, never reaching the scale she had envisioned. But at what cost? I need time to think, Amara said, standing up. This isn't just about money or growth. It's about integrity. The next few days were a blur of sleepless nights and countless conversations. Amara met with community leaders, educators, and even some of the program's first participants. She needed to get their perspectives, to understand how they felt about the changes on the horizon. It's a great opportunity, Amara, said Tyrone, one of the program's first graduates. But we've seen how these companies operate. They promise the world, but in the end, it's all about the bottom line. I know, Amara said, frustration creeping into her voice. But if we don't take this step, we won't be able to help as many people. We need the resources, the infrastructure, to really make a difference. But I won't let them take over. Tyrone nodded, his expression serious. You're walking a fine line, Amara. Just don't lose sight of who you're doing this for. If they try to twist things, you've got to stand your ground. You've got us behind you. It was late one evening when Amara finally sat down with Elon to make her decision. The numbers, the proposals, the partnerships, they all swirled in her mind. But none of it mattered unless she could maintain the soul of the program. I've made up my mind, she said quietly, looking up at Elon. We're not giving up control. We'll find another way to scale this without losing ourselves in the process. Elon studied her for a long moment, his eyes unwavering. You know this will be a fight, right? I'm ready for it, Amara replied. It's not just about us anymore. It's about the people we're trying to lift up. Elon smiled, though there was a flicker of concern in his eyes. I respect that. Let's take it to them. But remember, it's not going to be easy. The next day, Amara stood before the tech company executives, her resolve stronger than ever. The stakes were high, and the room was filled with tension as she presented her stance. We're grateful for your support, Amara began. But we need to be clear. We will not allow this program to become just another corporate initiative. If we're going to move forward, we do so as partners, with respect for the mission, the communities, and the people who are at the heart of this program. The executives exchanged glances, the tension palpable in the air. Finally, one of them spoke. You're asking us to take a risk, but you've already proven that this program works. Maybe it's time we trust you. Amara held her breath, waiting for the next words. They could either back down or press forward, taking her vision seriously. We're willing to proceed, the executive said, but we need a new agreement, one that ensures your control over the direction. Amara let out a quiet breath of relief. It was far from perfect, but it was a win. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time, Amara felt like the program had a real chance of becoming the transformative force she'd always believed it could be. As Amara stepped into the boardroom, the weight of her decision pressed heavily on her chest, but she knew it was time to face the storm head-on. The deal was done. The tech company had agreed to the terms, though the concessions had been hard-earned. The balance between securing resources and maintaining control over her vision had been delicate, but Amara had managed it. The future was still uncertain, but at least now she had a fighting chance. But as the days passed, Amara couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. The executives at the tech company had smiled and agreed, but their words felt hollow, almost rehearsed. They had promised to respect her autonomy, but Amara wasn't naive. She knew that behind the polished facade of corporate meetings and press releases, there were hidden agendas. Elon had been her rock throughout the process, but even he seemed to be grappling with the growing tension. The promises made on paper weren't translating to the kind of action that would turn this vision into reality. The tech company's resources were starting to flow in, but there was an undercurrent of something darker at play. Amara had just wrapped up a meeting with the board of community leaders when she received an urgent call from her lawyer. "Amara, I need you to come in. We've got a problem," the voice on the other end of the line said, panic creeping into their tone. She didn't waste a second. She grabbed her things, leaving the office without a word to anyone. Her mind raced, but deep down, she knew the moment she had been dreading had finally arrived. The cracks were starting to show. Inside the lawyer's office, Amara's lawyer, Rachel, was pacing, her face tense. "It's the funding," Rachel said as soon as Amara entered. "The tech company has started pulling back on some of the financial commitments they made. Not all of it, but enough to raise a red flag. There's a clause in the contract that allows them to scale back if certain conditions aren't met." Amara sat down, her thoughts swirling. What conditions? They're not happy with the way the program is being rolled out. They want more influence, more oversight. They're starting to use their leverage to push for changes in the program structure, changes that undermine your original vision. Amara clenched her fists, her jaw tightening. The very thing she had feared was happening. She had thought that by securing the deal on her terms, she had protected the integrity of the program. But now it seemed like the tech company was circling, waiting for the right moment to strike. "I won't let them take control," Amara said, determination in her voice. "I'll fight this." Rachel nodded, but there was concern in her eyes. "You're going to need more than just a strong will. You need a strategy, and we need to act fast before they can exploit any more loopholes." Amara's mind raced. There had to be a way to outmaneuver them. She had built this program from the ground up. She wasn't about to let it be swallowed whole by corporate greed. The next few days were a blur of meetings, phone calls, and long hours spent drafting counterproposals. Amara didn't sleep. She couldn't afford to. Every move she made was critical. Every word, every document had to be airtight. But even as she worked tirelessly, she couldn't ignore the growing rift between herself and Elon. It wasn't that they weren't on the same side, they were. But the tension between them was palpable, a slow simmer that threatened to boil over. "You need to think about the bigger picture, Amara," Elon had said one evening as they sat in the conference room, reviewing legal documents. "This is about growth, about the future. You can't let your principles blind you to the opportunities ahead. The program will thrive with their backing. You can't push them too hard." Amara had stared at him, her frustration bubbling over. "I'm not blinded by principles, Elon. I'm fighting for what we've built. If we let them take control now, all of this will be for nothing. Will be nothing more than a tool for their agenda." Elon had sighed, rubbing his temples. "I get it, Amara. I do. But the stakes are higher than ever. We need to think about what's best for everyone involved." Amara had left the meeting that night feeling more alone than ever. It wasn't just the tech company she had to fight against. It was the pressure from everyone around her to compromise, to take what was offered and make the best of it. But she couldn't shake the feeling that once she gave in, there would be no going back. The breaking point came when the tech company issued an ultimatum. They wanted to restructure the leadership team, putting one of their own executives at the helm of the program. They insisted it was for the sake of efficiency, but Amara knew the real reason. It was a power play, pure and simple. She was done negotiating. With a steely resolve, Amara called an emergency meeting with the board of directors. Elon was there, his face unreadable. The community leaders were there too, all waiting to hear what she would say. "I'm done compromising," Amara said, her voice strong, clear, and unwavering. "This is our program, and we will not allow anyone to hijack it for their own gain. If they want to pull out, let them. We'll build this on our own terms. If we have to fight for every dollar, we will. But I will not let this vision be twisted into something it was never meant to be." The room fell silent. For a moment, no one spoke. Then, slowly, one of the community leaders, Tyrone, stood up. "You've got our support, Amara," he said, his voice firm. "We're in this with you." It was a risk, one that could either make or break the program. But Amara knew she couldn't back down now. The battle was far from over, but at least now she had the support of the people who mattered most, those who had believed in her vision from the very beginning. As the meeting adjourned, Amara walked out of the room, a fire igniting within her. She didn't know how this would end, but she knew one thing. She wasn't going down without a fight. Amara has drawn her line in the sand. But will her resolve be enough to withstand the corporate pressure closing in? The battle is heating up, and the stakes have never been higher. Will Amara's vision survive the storm, or will the tech giants win the war? Stay tuned, share your thoughts, and don't miss the next chapter. As Amara stood before the towering glass building of the tech giants' headquarters, a strange calm washed over her, a calm born of knowing she had nothing left to lose. The air outside was cold, and the wind picked up, sending a chill through her body. But inside, she felt a fire burning hotter than ever. This was it, the final confrontation. She had pushed all her chips to the center, and now there was no turning back. It was time to make the ultimate choice. Let them take control or fight for her dream. The meeting was set. The tech company's executives had demanded it, an ultimatum. Amara could either agree to the new leadership structure, giving up her control, or they would pull their funding completely. But she knew this was more than just about money. It was a fight for everything she had worked for everything her community had sacrificed. Elon had tried to talk her out of it. This isn't the way, Amara. You don't have to fight them head-on, he had said the night before, his voice low with concern. Think about the bigger picture. You can still get what you want if you play it smart. But Amara was done playing games. I can't keep compromising, Elon. I've been bending and twisting, trying to make this work on their terms. But now they want to tear it all down. I can't let that happen. He hadn't said anything after that. He hadn't argued, hadn't pushed. Instead, he had simply looked at her with a mixture of admiration and worry, knowing that no matter how hard he tried to protect her, Amara had made up her mind. The boardroom was sleek, minimalist, a perfect reflection of the tech company's sterile, corporate world. The table stretched long and cold, with executives seated at either end. At the far side, the CEO, Jason Hartley, sat with a self-assured smile. But Amara could see the tension beneath his polished exterior. Amara, he greeted her with a cold nod as she entered. I'm glad you could make it. She ignored the hand he offered, taking a seat at the table with purpose. Let's get this over with. Jason exchanged a glance with his team, then leaned forward. We've been more than reasonable, Amara. You know that. The restructuring we're proposing is in the best interest of the project. We can't move forward if you continue to resist the necessary changes. Amara didn't flinch. What's really at stake here, Jason? You don't want a program that empowers communities. You want to control it. You want to bend it to fit your agenda, and you're using your money as leverage. The room grew quiet. Jason's lips tightened, and he let out a sharp breath, as if the accusation stung more than he'd expected. Amara, this is about scaling, he said, his voice losing its confident edge. We can't build something sustainable without structure, without control, and we're offering you a future you won't have without us. Amara's gaze was unwavering. A future where I'm just a pawn in your game? No thanks. The silence that followed was thick, oppressive. No one spoke. The tension in the room was palpable as Amara took a deep breath, gathering her strength. I won't be intimidated, Jason, she said, her voice calm but fierce. I built this. I know what it's capable of, and I'm not about to let you turn it into another corporate experiment. If that means walking away from your money, then so be it. For a moment, Jason's eyes narrowed, calculating, assessing. Then he leaned back in his chair, the smirk returning to his face. You're playing a dangerous game, Amara. You think you can make it without us? I don't need you, she said, the words coming out sharper than she intended. And I certainly don't need your control. The room was still as death. The minutes dragged on like hours as Jason's team exchanged uncertain glances. Amara could feel the pressure mounting, the walls closing in, but she held her ground. Finally, Jason spoke, his voice cold and calculating. You want to fight this on your own? Fine, but don't say we didn't warn you. It was over. The deal was off. Amara walked out of the meeting with her head held high, her heart pounding in her chest. She had done it. She had refused to bend, refused to back down. But the victory felt hollow, as if she had just stepped off a cliff and hadn't yet figured out if there was a way to land. The fallout was swift. The tech company pulled all its funding, and their public statement painted Amara as an ungrateful partner who refused to see the bigger picture. The media didn't hold back, either. Headlines blasted across news feeds, calling her reckless, naive, and foolish for turning down the opportunity of a lifetime. But as the storm raged around her, Amara found herself with an unexpected ally. The community leaders who had supported her from the start, including Tyrone, rallied behind her in full force. "We'll keep fighting," Tyrone said, his voice firm. "We didn't start this to let some corporation take control. We're with you, Amara." Elon, though silent through most of the backlash, reached out to her later that night. His message was simple, but it meant the world to her. "You did the right thing," it read. "I'm with you, whatever happens." But the real challenge was just beginning. Without the tech company's resources, Amara was back at square one. But the people who believed in her, the ones who saw the potential of the program for what it was, were still by her side. Together, they would have to find a new way forward. It wouldn't be easy, but Amara had learned something that day, something vital. She could fight alone, and she would. Amara has taken a stand, against the odds, against the tech giants, and against the pressure to compromise her vision. But what happens next? Will she rise from the ashes, or has her defiance sealed her fate? When Amara looked out over the city's skyline from the roof of the building, she felt like she was standing on the edge of a new beginning, or the brink of a total collapse. The news was relentless. Every day, new articles, new headlines, each one more damning than the last. "Amara's bold move leads to disaster," the tabloid screamed. "Tech giant cuts ties with controversial project." And the worst part? The community that had once rallied around her was starting to waver. Doubt was creeping in like a slow, insidious tide. Amara had walked away from the tech company's offer, but what did she have left now? The resources were gone, and so were the sponsors. Yet, in the darkest part of her heart, she still believed in what she was fighting for. She could feel it, that spark, the thing that had pushed her this far, even when everyone told her it was impossible. It was late when Tyrone called her. She had been staring at the empty office, trying to make sense of the next move, but everything seemed impossible. "Amara, we need to talk." Tyrone's voice crackled through the phone, low and urgent. "You've got to hear what's going down." She sat up straight. "What's going on?" "There's movement, but not the good kind. A bunch of investors, big names, people you can't ignore, are looking to take over what you started. They see this as a power play. They're circling, Amara." Her stomach twisted. "They're trying to buy it out?" "Not just that. They want to replace you. They think they can run it better. Make it more marketable, you know?" Amara ran a hand over her face. This was it. The moment when her project could be ripped from her hands. But it wasn't just the money at stake now. It was her integrity. If she allowed them to take over, she would lose everything she had fought for. All of it. Elon had warned her this could happen. He had seen it before. People who were too focused on the bottom line to care about the vision. The world didn't care about ideals. It only cared about the profit. She had heard him say it, but she didn't want to believe it. Until now. "Amara, we need a strategy," Tyrone urged. "We can't let them win without a fight. We've got people who will back us. We've got power in numbers. But we need to act fast." "I know," she replied, her voice heavy. "But what can we do when they've got all the money, the connections? We're just people." "You're more than just people," Tyrone said firmly. "You've got vision. You've got heart. People follow that. We need to remind them what this was really about." The next morning, Amara gathered a group of her most loyal supporters. They were from all walks of life, community leaders, former colleagues, even a few people who had helped with the initial stages of the program. Each one had a stake in what she was building. Each one had a reason to fight. They sat around the table in her makeshift office, the hum of a city that didn't care about them buzzing just beyond the windows. Amara looked around the room, meeting each pair of eyes, feeling the weight of what they were about to do. "This is our last chance," she began, her voice steady but full of conviction. "We've been given a gift, a chance to change things for the better. But it's not going to be easy. The company that's trying to buy us out, they'll do whatever it takes to take control. They've got money, they've got influence, but they don't have our hearts. And that's where we can win." A murmur of agreement spread around the room. Tyrone leaned forward, his voice sharp with focus. "We can't beat them at their own game. But we don't have to. We've got something they don't, people who believe in us. If we want to take this to the next level, we've got to show them that we're not just a product they can buy. We're a movement." Amara nodded. Tyrone was right. She had to appeal to the one thing the investors and corporate giants couldn't buy: the people, the strength of the community, the support of the individuals who believed in her project not just because it made sense on paper, but because it represented something bigger. But where would they find the leverage? The idea came to her like a spark. "We'll take it public," she said suddenly, surprising even herself. The room went quiet as everyone processed what she had said. "You're thinking social media?" Tyrone asked. "Yes. We'll use every platform. We'll take this fight to the people. They can't ignore the public outcry. Not when we have real stories, real people showing what this project means. It's not just about a tech company. It's about changing lives." The room erupted into conversation, everyone brainstorming how they could make the idea work. Amara knew it was risky, but it was their only option. If they didn't rally the people behind them, they were done for. As the days passed, the campaign began to take shape. Amara and her team worked tirelessly to create a social media movement. Videos, posts, interviews with the people whose lives had already been touched by the project. They told their stories of empowerment, of real change. They didn't hide from the tough questions. They didn't try to spin it. They just told the truth. And the truth was something that even the biggest corporations couldn't deny. Elon reached out to her again, this time with a suggestion. "I've seen the campaign, Amara. You've got something here. It's not about beating them at their own game. It's about making them realize they're on the wrong side of history. I want to help. I can use my platform to get the word out." It was a lifeline she hadn't expected. Elon Musk, the man whose name was synonymous with innovation, was offering his support. It wasn't just money, it was credibility. It was a signal to the world that what Amara was doing wasn't some small, insignificant project. It was the future. Amara's fight is just beginning. Will she be able to turn the tide against the powerful investors who want to take over her dream? The next chapter will reveal if she can win the battle for her project and for the people who believe in it. Don't miss out, stay tuned, and let us know what you think in the comments below. In the face of relentless pressure, Amara stood tall, feeling like she was stepping into the unknown. But the weight of the world pressing down on her shoulders was no longer just a burden. It was a challenge. The campaign was catching fire. What had started as a desperate move to raise awareness had morphed into something more powerful than Amara could have imagined. Videos flooded social media, each more compelling than the last. Personal testimonies, the stories of those who had found new opportunities thanks to her project. These were the things that resonated. The people spoke, and the world had to listen. But with success came backlash. The corporate world was not one to go quietly, and Amara's fight had only begun to attract the real enemies. It was a Sunday evening when Amara received the first warning. Her phone buzzed with a notification. She opened it and stared at the message for a long time, unsure of what it meant. The text was simple but ominous. "You're playing with fire. Step back, or you'll get burned." Amara's fingers tightened around the phone. It wasn't the first time she had received threats. It wasn't even the worst one. But something about this message sent a chill down her spine. They were watching her. They knew who she was. "Who was that?" Tyrone asked, sensing the tension in the room. "I don't know," she replied, the unease creeping into her voice. "But it feels real this time, like they're coming for me." Tyrone glanced at the phone, his eyes narrowing. "You need to be careful. This is bigger than you thought. These people, they don't lose." Amara stood up and walked over to the window, her eyes scanning the horizon. "I can't stop now, Tyrone. I've come too far. If I back down now, everything we've worked for is gone. I won't let that happen." The next morning, the campaign's momentum hit another milestone. The hashtag Our Future Now was trending worldwide. Support flooded in from every corner of the globe. Videos of ordinary people standing up, talking about how Amara's project had changed their lives, went viral. But the dark side of success revealed itself soon enough. The media war had begun. Headlines started shifting, casting Amara in a new light. Amara's project, a pipe dream or dangerous gamble, one article screamed. Investor pulls out, tech giant faces serious backlash, another headline blared. The media was turning against her, and the corporations were getting smarter. They weren't just attacking her project, they were attacking her personally. Old stories were dug up, rumors were spread, and whispers of scandal began to circulate. Amara sat at her desk, scrolling through the new wave of articles. Each one felt like a punch in the gut. But the thing that angered her the most wasn't the lies. They were expected. It was the fact that the very people who had cheered her on were now starting to doubt her. "What's going on?" Tyrone asked, entering the room with a grim expression. "They're trying to destroy me," Amara said, her voice tight with emotion. "They found every flaw, every mistake, and they're using it to tear me apart. They're not even pretending to care about the project anymore. It's all about making me look like a fraud." Tyrone frowned. "They'll stop at nothing. But that's why we have to keep fighting. You can't let them drown out the truth. We have the people on our side. The truth is on our side." "I don't know if I can keep up this fight, Tyrone," she confessed. "The pressure, it's overwhelming. They've got money, connections, and the media. What do I have? You've got the people, Amara. The ones who believe in you. You've got the truth. And you've got me." As the week wore on, the pressure only mounted. Amara received calls from her closest allies, each one warning her to be careful. There were whispers about shady tactics being used against her. People close to her were being threatened. Her team was being hacked, and the investors behind her project were growing restless. But through it all, Amara kept going. She couldn't stop now. Not when everything she had built was on the line. She had spent years working toward this moment. It had never been about the money, the fame, or the power. It had been about making a real difference. Then, a breakthrough came. Elon Musk reached out once again, offering a solution, one that could turn the tide in her favor. "I know what you're up against," Elon said during a video call, "but you don't have to fight this alone. I've been where you are, and I've seen what happens when the system tries to crush you. You're not just fighting for your project anymore, you're fighting for something bigger, and I can help with that." Amara listened intently as Elon laid out his plan. It wasn't just about defending herself, it was about going on the offensive. "We're going to need to show the world exactly who these people are," Elon said. "Expose them for what they're doing. Make sure everyone sees their tactics, their manipulation. Let the people decide who the real villains are." Amara nodded slowly. It was risky, but it was the only move she had left. If she didn't expose the truth now, it might be too late. In the days that followed, Amara's team worked tirelessly, compiling evidence, testimonies, and interviews from insiders who had once worked with the corporations trying to shut her down. They documented every shady deal, every illegal move, every step taken to sabotage her efforts. Amara's campaign went from being a battle for her project to a full-fledged fight for justice. The truth was out, and now, it was time to let the world see it. The moment the first expose hit the headlines, everything changed, and Amara knew there was no turning back. For days, the battle had been fought in the shadows, with threats and accusations flying. But now, the truth had been unleashed, and the world was watching. Amara's team, with the help of Elon and a few trusted allies, had released the first wave of their findings, evidence of corruption, insider trading, and a concerted effort to destroy not just her project, but the lives of countless people who dared to challenge the status quo. The expose went viral within hours. The world could no longer ignore what had been happening behind the scenes. Major news outlets picked up the story, and suddenly, the corporations and their puppets in the media were scrambling to contain the damage. Amara sat at her desk, watching the live coverage of the expose as it spread like wildfire. Her phone was ringing off the hook, but she couldn't bring herself to answer. Instead, she sat in silence, watching as the revelations continued to unfold on screen. There were moments when she wanted to shut it all out, to pretend none of this was happening. But as the magnitude of her actions began to sink in, she realized there was no turning back. She had crossed the line, and the world was on fire because of it. "Amara, we're trending worldwide," Tyrone said, entering the room with an almost stunned expression. "People are talking about it. Everyone's talking about it." Amara barely registered his words. "What happens next?" "We keep pushing," Tyrone said firmly. "We don't stop until we've exposed everything. These people won't stop until they crush us. We can't give them the satisfaction of thinking they've won." Amara nodded, her eyes fixed on the screen. The exposé had revealed the names of influential executives, members of the board, and high-ranking politicians who had been complicit in the campaign to undermine her. The shocking nature of the revelations was causing chaos. Alliances were fracturing, and public opinion was shifting rapidly. But despite the support from the public, there was still a lingering doubt in her mind. Would this be enough? That evening, Elon reached out again. This time, his voice was more urgent than ever. "You've got them on the ropes, Amara," he said. "But we need to strike fast. The longer they have to regroup, the harder it'll be to maintain momentum. You've got to go after the people who are truly behind all of this, the ones who are pulling the strings in the shadows." Amara clenched her fists. The idea of exposing the true masterminds behind this conspiracy was terrifying, but she knew it was the only way to ensure they didn't disappear into the shadows again. She had to make sure that justice was served not just for her, but for all those whose lives had been ruined in the process. "I'm ready," she said, her voice steady with determination. "Let's finish this." The next few days were a blur of late nights and intense strategy meetings. Amara's team, now bolstered by new allies, worked tirelessly to compile the most damning evidence yet. This time, it wasn't just about a few corrupt individuals. It was about exposing the system that had allowed these abuses to thrive. The moment came when Amara stood before the cameras once again, ready to release the final bombshell. This time, she didn't just reveal names or financial records. She showed the world how far the corruption had spread, how deep the conspiracy ran, and how it was affecting millions of lives. "We're not just fighting for a project anymore," Amara said in her speech, her voice steady but filled with conviction. "We're fighting for accountability. We're fighting for truth. And we're fighting for every single person who's been crushed by this corrupt system." As the final exposé went live, the world held its breath. News outlets across the globe aired the video, dissecting each revelation. Social media was ablaze, with people demanding justice and calling for reform. In the coming days, investigations were launched into the corporations and individuals involved. Public pressure mounted, and several high-profile figures were forced to resign or face charges. But it wasn't just the powerful who were being held accountable. The public, inspired by Amara's courage, began demanding change in every sector of society. By the end of the week, Amara had received messages from people all over the world, people who had seen her fight and were now joining the cause. It was overwhelming, humbling, and a reminder of why she had started this journey in the first place. But the fight was far from over. That night, as Amara sat in her office, reflecting on everything that had happened, she felt a mix of exhaustion and triumph. It was hard to believe that just a few months ago, she had been a teenager with a dream, unsure of how to make it a reality. Now, she had taken on the system and won. And yet, despite the victory, she knew that this was just the beginning. The fight for justice, for equality, and for a better world was never truly over. There would be more battles to fight, more challenges to overcome. But Amara was ready. She had proven that one person could make a difference, and she wasn't about to stop now. Just when Amara thought the worst was behind her, a new challenge emerged, one that threatened everything she had worked for. Amara had fought hard to expose the truth, and in the aftermath of the explosive revelations, she had become something more than just a voice for change. She had become a symbol. But with that symbol came a target. The more she fought for justice, the more enemies she made, and the more dangerous her position became. The media had moved on, but the fight was far from over. While the public was rallying behind her, the corporate giants and corrupt officials who had been exposed weren't taking the loss lightly. They had resources, power, and a network that stretched far beyond anything Amara had ever imagined. It was just after dawn when Amara received a message that sent a chill down her spine. "We know what you're doing. Stay out of our way. If you don't, we'll make sure everyone you love pays the price." The threat was clear, but it wasn't the first she'd received. After the expose, her team had been prepared for retaliation, but seeing the message in black and white, she realized just how deep the danger had grown. "Amara," Tyrone said, entering the office with a look of concern on his face. "We need to talk about the next steps. This is getting out of hand. If they're really making threats like this, we might need to lay low for a bit." Amara shook her head. "We can't afford to lay low. Not now. If we stop, it'll all have been for nothing. We have to finish what we started." "But the stakes are higher now," Tyrone insisted. "It's not just your career anymore. It's your life. You can't just keep pushing forward like this." Amara knew Tyrone was right. The risks had escalated, but she also knew that turning back now would mean surrendering to the very people she had been fighting. They had already stolen so much, and Amara wasn't about to let them steal her resolve. "Get in touch with Elon," Amara said, her voice firm. "We need to know everything about the people behind these threats. I want to hit them where it hurts." Elon was quick to respond. His team had already begun gathering intelligence on the individuals behind the conspiracy. They were powerful, with connections that stretched through the highest levels of government, law enforcement, and the financial sector. Amara knew that taking them down wouldn't be easy, but she wasn't going to stop. She had come too far. "Amara, I've got the information you need," Elon said over the phone, his tone serious. "The people making these threats are connected to some of the biggest names in the tech industry. But it's not just about business. There's something much darker going on here. I don't think they're just trying to silence you. They're trying to control you." The realization hit her like a freight train. This wasn't just a fight for truth anymore. It was a fight for freedom. If she let them win, if she gave in to their intimidation, it wouldn't just be her life at stake. It would be the future of everyone who had ever believed in her cause. "We can't let them win," Amara said, her voice resolute. "I won't back down. We go after them now, with everything we've got." The next few weeks were a blur of strategy meetings, covert operations, and securing the safety of those closest to her. Amara's team worked tirelessly to gather evidence and build a case that would take down the masterminds behind the threats. Meanwhile, Elon's involvement was more crucial than ever. With his resources and connections, he was able to help her navigate the dangerous waters of the corporate world. But just as Amara thought she was gaining ground, something unexpected happened. One evening, as Amara was reviewing the latest reports, her phone rang. It was a number she didn't recognize. "Hello?" she answered, her voice cautious. "Amara," a cold voice said on the other end. "You think you've won, but you have no idea what you're up against. You're just a pawn in a much bigger game. You'll regret ever crossing us." The line went dead. Amara's heart raced. She had suspected that the people she was fighting were powerful, but this confirmed it. They weren't just a handful of corrupt executives or politicians. They were part of a larger network, one that would stop at nothing to maintain their grip on power. "I think it's time to escalate," Elon said when Amara relayed the phone call to him. "We've got to hit them harder. They're not going to stop unless we make them. We need to go public with everything we've got, expose them for the world to see." But Amara hesitated. Going public would put everything on the line. Her safety, her team's safety, and the stability of the project she had fought so hard to protect. "I'm not sure we can afford that risk yet," Amara said, looking out of the window of her office. "We need to make sure we have enough evidence to take them down completely. If we go too soon, we might tip them off." As the days passed, the pressure mounted. Amara felt like a ticking time bomb, waiting for the other shoe to drop. And then, one night, it did. Amara was heading to her car after a long day when a group of masked figures emerged from the shadows. Before she could react, one of them grabbed her, pushing her against the car. Another held a gun to her head. "Stay down, and you won't get hurt," one of them growled, his voice low and menacing. For a moment, everything froze. Amara's heart pounded in her chest, but then she remembered something Elon had told her. "You can't let fear control you. If you do, they've already won." In that moment, Amara made a choice. She fought back. With a sudden burst of strength, she shoved the man with the gun away from her, knocking him to the ground. Before anyone could react, she sprinted toward the door of the building, pulling her phone from her pocket and dialing Elon's number. "Elon, they found me," she gasped, her breath coming in ragged gasps as she ran. "We need backup now." In the wake of the attack, Amara realized just how deep the conspiracy went and how much danger she was truly in. The night had started like any other, but now, with her heart pounding and her mind racing, Amara knew her life had just changed forever. The masked figures had nearly taken her down, but she had fought back. And yet, the terrifying reality of the situation sank in. These weren't just random thugs. These were people with power, and they would stop at nothing to silence her. She had barely made it inside the building before the attack occurred. Amara's hands were shaking as she typed the final message to Elon, telling him she was safe, for now. Her body ached from the adrenaline that had coursed through her, and she had barely had time to process the encounter. The fact that they had found her so quickly meant that her every move was being watched. "Amara, are you okay?" Tyrone's voice echoed from the other end of the line. "I'm alive," she answered tersely, "but this isn't over. I can't keep running. They will find me again." Tyrone sighed, his voice low and concerned. "You need to get out of the city. They're getting too close. You can't keep playing this game with them on their turf." But Amara wasn't ready to run. She couldn't let fear dictate her actions. She had already made sacrifices, too many to count, and now, with everything on the line, there was no way she could back down. "I'm not going anywhere," she said firmly. "I'm staying right here. We've come too far. We'll take them down, and we'll do it on our terms." Tyrone didn't argue, though she could hear the hesitation in his voice. "All right, but you need to be careful. I'll have some backup sent your way." As Amara hung up the phone, the gravity of the situation hit her with full force. The people behind the attack weren't just after her. They were after everything she stood for. Her work, her cause, the truth that she had been fighting to reveal. With the help of Elon and her trusted team, they had uncovered some of the names connected to the conspiracy. Powerful, untouchable figures. Some of them were people she had once admired. Others were well-known public figures, but none of them were beyond the law. Amara paced the floor of her apartment, thinking about the risks she was facing. The fight had never been about her. It was about something much bigger. This wasn't just her battle. It was a fight for every person who had been silenced, oppressed, and ignored. It was about the future she had promised to shape for herself and for those who believed in her. But as the hours passed, she knew that staying in the city might not be the safest option. She had to move, only it wasn't about running away. She needed to go on the offensive. It was then that she received the call that changed everything. "Amara," Elon's voice was urgent. "I've got something for you. You need to meet me at the safe house, immediately." The safe house was a place hidden in plain sight. A small, inconspicuous building on the outskirts of the city, away from the prying eyes of those who might be watching. When Amara arrived, Elon was already waiting for her, his expression unreadable. "I've uncovered something," he said, motioning for her to follow him inside. "Something big." Inside, Elon showed her a series of files, documents, photos, and emails that painted a much darker picture than they had anticipated. The conspiracy wasn't just a matter of corporate greed. It was a vast network of corruption that stretched into the highest echelons of government, law enforcement, and even the military. The people pulling the strings weren't just interested in silencing her. They were working to reshape the entire political landscape of the country. They had connections, influence, and enough resources to manipulate elections, control the media, and suppress dissent. "This isn't just about you anymore," Elon said, his tone grim. "This is about a movement that could threaten everything they've built. If we expose this, it'll shake the foundations of power itself." Amara knew that the stakes had just escalated. They weren't just taking on powerful individuals anymore. They were challenging the very system that held the country together. "How do we bring this down?" Amara asked, her mind already working through the logistics. Elon paused, then met her gaze with a steely determination. "We go public. But this time, we don't do it alone. We bring in the people. We need to mobilize. Make the truth undeniable. The plan was set into motion. Amara and her team worked tirelessly to gather more evidence, preparing to make everything public in a way that the authorities and media couldn't ignore. The stakes were high, and the risks were greater than ever, but Amara was ready. Her message was clear. If they wanted to take her down, they would have to fight harder than ever before. She wasn't going down without a fight. As Amara prepared for the next phase of the battle, she couldn't help but feel the weight of the world on her shoulders. But she knew that the path forward was the only one she could take. It was time to take the fight to them. Because, as far as she was concerned, there was no turning back now. When Amara decided to go public, she knew there was no turning back, but she didn't expect the world to react the way it did. The next few days blurred together as Amara and Elon's team meticulously prepared for their most dangerous move yet. They had to make sure their evidence was airtight. Every document, every photo, every conversation had to be ready for the world to see. But as the date for the reveal drew closer, the pressure weighed heavier on her shoulders. Amara sat in front of her laptop, staring at the screen, the hours of work behind her overwhelming. She had barely slept. The plan was simple. Release the documents to the public, ensure they were picked up by credible sources, and then wait for the storm to hit. But even with a solid strategy in place, she couldn't shake the nagging doubt in her mind. The people they were about to expose had more power than she could even fathom. What if they weren't ready for the backlash? What if the truth wasn't enough to bring them down? We're not just giving them information, Elon had reminded her the night before. We're giving them a chance to fight back. They'll have the means, the resources, and the influence to try to stop us. But we have the truth, and they can't hide from that forever. The day of the release came, and Amara felt like she was standing at the edge of a precipice. With a final click, the documents went live, hitting social media, news outlets, and online forums like a bomb. Almost instantly, the chaos began. News anchors on every channel discussed the bombshell, highlighting the vast corruption and the names involved in the conspiracy. There was talk of government officials, corporate moguls, and military leaders. The scale of the operation was far greater than anyone had imagined, and people were stunned. But it wasn't just the news that erupted. Social media exploded as well. Thousands of people began to share the story, demand accountability, and call for justice. People who had previously felt powerless were rallying behind Amara, using the hashtag she had created to spread the word. But with the support came backlash. Powerful figures, with their loyal followers, began to attack the narrative, claiming that the documents were fabricated, that it was all part of a smear campaign. They called it fake news, tried to discredit the sources, and launched a public relations blitz to downplay the severity of the evidence. Amara watched the reactions unfold from the safety of the safe house, knowing it was only a matter of time before the people who were exposed would fight back. The question wasn't whether they would try to stop her, it was when. Her phone buzzed with a message from Tyrone. Amara, they're coming for you. You need to lay low. Amara's heart skipped a beat. She knew what that meant. This wasn't just about keeping the story alive anymore. It was about survival. We need to move now, she muttered, turning to Elon, who was pacing nearby. Elon nodded, his face hardening. It's not just about the documents anymore. They're trying to intimidate us. This is bigger than just a fight for the truth. It's a fight for control. The first wave of attacks came swiftly. Anonymous threats flooded her phone, warning her to stop the campaign before it was too late. But Amara wasn't backing down. She couldn't afford to. She had spent too much time fighting for what was right. The next day, Amara received an unexpected visit. The doorbell rang, and when she opened it, there stood one of the last people she ever expected to see. Franklin Moore, one of the government officials implicated in the documents. I came to offer you a deal, Franklin said, his voice cold but with a hint of desperation. Amara took a step back, unsure of what to make of the situation. What kind of deal? He cleared his throat. You're stirring up a lot of trouble. You don't know what you're up against. But I can make it go away. You can disappear. All of this can stop if you just back off. Amara's mind raced. She had heard these kinds of offers before. They weren't about peace. They were about silence. You think I'll just walk away? Amara replied, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her. You can't stop me now. The truth is out. Franklin's expression darkened. You think it's that simple? You don't know what's at stake. If you keep pushing this, you'll regret it. We can make your life a living hell. Your threats don't scare me, Amara said. I've seen how deep this goes, and I'm not backing down now. Franklin hesitated, then gave her a cold, knowing smile. We'll see about that. He turned on his heel and left without another word. As he walked away, Amara felt the weight of his words. The fight was far from over. In fact, it had just begun. Elon was right. They had to be ready for everything. She couldn't afford to let her guard down. But she wasn't alone in this fight. Not anymore. Back in the safe house, Amara and her team regrouped. Elon was there, Tyrone was on the phone with their contacts, and everyone was working to keep the pressure on the people responsible for the conspiracy. The truth was out there now, but the battle for justice was only starting. If Amara thought the attacks on her life were bad, she had no idea what they were preparing for her next. The truth had been unleashed. The documents were out. The world knew what the conspiracy was capable of, but Amara quickly realized that the fight for justice wasn't going to be easy. In fact, it was about to get far more dangerous. Amara sat with Elon in a dimly lit room, her eyes scanning the news feed. The faces of the people they had exposed were all over the television, trying to paint themselves as victims of a smear campaign. But the evidence didn't lie. The truth was on their side, and still, she couldn't shake the fear building in her chest. We're making them sweat, Elon said, his tone calm, but there was a fire in his eyes. He wasn't backing down either. But they won't stop. They'll try everything to discredit us. I know, Amara replied, her voice steady, though her hands trembled slightly, but I'm ready for it. We've come this far. I can't let them win. The phone rang, breaking the silence. It was Tyrone. Amara, you need to be careful. They're not just going to let this go. I've got eyes on you. What do you mean? Amara asked, concern creeping into her voice. Who's after me now? It's not just one group, Tyrone replied, his voice tight. They're pulling out all the stops. You're a threat now. They've already started moving people into place. People who'll stop at nothing to shut you down. Amara felt the blood drain from her face. The weight of Tyrone's words hung heavily in the air. The conspiracy they had exposed wasn't just a few powerful people. It was a web of influential figures, pulling strings behind the scenes. And now, she was their target. We need to get you out of there. You can't stay there any longer, Tyrone insisted. I'm not leaving, Amara said with resolve. I can't run. Not now. Not after everything we've fought for. Elon turned to her, his expression unwavering. Tyrone's right. It's getting too dangerous. We've got to be strategic. Just as the words left his mouth, a loud crash interrupted their conversation. The front door of the safe house had been forced open. Amara's heart pounded in her chest as the sound of boots stomping through the hallway reached her ears. Go. Now. Elon shouted, grabbing her arm and pulling her toward the back exit. Amara didn't hesitate. Her legs moved on autopilot as they ran through the back door and into the alley, her breath coming in short bursts. They didn't stop running until they reached the car, and Elon sped off with little regard for traffic. Amara could feel her pulse racing as the car swerved down the deserted streets. She couldn't believe what was happening. This wasn't just a fight for justice anymore. It was a fight for survival. They won't stop until they've silenced us, Elon said grimly, his grip tight on the steering wheel. But we can't give up now. Amara nodded, her mind reeling. She had come so far, and now, she wasn't just a whistleblower. She was a target. The people behind the conspiracy were pulling every string, using every resource to try to crush her and anyone connected to her. But she couldn't back down. Not after everything they'd exposed. As the car sped through the streets, a message popped up on her phone. It was from Tyrone. They've already started making moves. Stay hidden. You're not safe yet. Her heart sank. There was no turning back now. She had made her decision. There was no escape from this fight. But as she looked out the window, watching the city blur past, a thought took root in her mind. This wasn't just about exposing the truth anymore. It wasn't even about surviving the backlash. It was about something bigger. Amara had uncovered a massive conspiracy. She had torn apart a system of corruption that had festered for decades, and now the world was watching. But if she gave up now, everything she had fought for would be meaningless. She couldn't let that happen. She had to finish what she started, no matter the cost. "We'll take them down," she said, more to herself than to Elon. "We have to." The next few hours were a blur of movement. They relocated to a new safe house, one even more hidden than the last. But Amara couldn't shake the feeling that their time was running out. She knew the people they were up against weren't just after her. They were coming for everyone who had helped her, who had believed in her. As they settled into the new hideout, the room felt suffocating. Amara's thoughts raced as she began to process the enormity of what they had set in motion. She was no longer just a victim of the system. She had become the symbol of resistance. Amara had never been more sure of anything in her life. The final confrontation was coming, and this time, she was ready. The last few days had been a whirlwind. Every moment spent in hiding, every whisper in the shadows, had led to this. The showdown that would decide not just her fate, but the fate of everything she had fought for. Amara sat in the dimly lit room, her hands folded tightly in front of her, trying to calm the storm raging inside her. The stakes were higher than ever before. The conspiracy was no longer just a shadow lurking in the background. It was real, it was dangerous, and it was closing in on her. Elon sat across from her, his face serious, his eyes darkened with worry. "We can't wait any longer, Amara. We have to make our move. The longer we stay in the shadows, the more power they gain." "I know," she said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "But we need to be careful. If we rush in without a plan, we'll be walking straight into their trap." "We don't have the luxury of waiting," Elon replied. "They're already trying to silence us, and we can't let them win. It's now or never." Amara looked out the window, her mind racing. She had never imagined that the journey would lead here. Hiding in the shadows, constantly looking over her shoulder, wondering who she could trust. But she couldn't stop now. Not after everything they had sacrificed. "They'll be expecting us to strike soon," Amara said, her voice low. "We have to be smarter. We need to find a way to expose them once and for all. We have to hit them where it hurts." Elon's lips twitched in the smallest of smiles, a dangerous gleam in his eye. "I know just the place, but it's going to take everything we've got. Are you ready?" Amara nodded, a sense of resolve settling over her. She had come too far to back down now. The fight for justice wasn't just a cause, it was her destiny. Hours later, they were on the move. A small, quiet team had gathered, Tyrone, a few trusted allies, and some tech experts who had helped them track the conspirators' every move. They had discovered the location of a private meeting between the key players behind the conspiracy. It was their last chance to bring it all to an end. As they approached the location, the tension was thick in the air. Amara's heartbeat was the only sound she could hear, and even that felt muffled by the anticipation. Elon glanced at her. "This is it. We make our stand here. No more running." Amara's breath hitched in her throat as they neared the building. The shadows of the night were their only allies now, and they used them to their advantage. Every step felt heavier than the last, as if the weight of everything they had fought for was on their shoulders. They made their way inside, bypassing security with the help of their tech experts. The plan was simple: infiltrate the meeting, gather the final pieces of evidence, and expose the conspiracy to the world. They couldn't afford any mistakes. As they crept through the darkened halls of the building, Amara's mind raced. This was her moment. She had worked her entire life to expose the truth, to bring these people to justice. But now, standing at the edge of this final confrontation, the fear of failure lingered in her gut. They reached the meeting room, and Elon signaled for them to stay back. He slowly pushed the door open, and Amara felt a cold chill run down her spine. The conspirators were inside, their voices low but sharp as they plotted their next move. Elon nodded to Tyrone, who stepped forward and planted a small device on the door, recording everything. Amara held her breath, every muscle in her body tense as she waited for the perfect moment. The conspirators continued to speak, unaware of the danger closing in on them. But then, one of them, Amara recognized his face instantly, turned toward the door, his eyes narrowing. "It's a trap!" he shouted, and chaos erupted. The conspirators scrambled to their feet, drawing weapons and lunging toward the exit. But it was too late. Tyrone and the team were already in position, securing the room and making sure no one escaped. Amara stepped into the room, her heart pounding in her chest. This was it. She had done it. The truth was out. She had exposed them all. "You thought you could silence me," Amara said, her voice loud and clear, filled with defiance. "But you were wrong. The world will know what you did." The conspirators froze, their faces filled with shock and disbelief. The evidence was irrefutable. They were trapped. Elon stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "It's over. Your time has come." The conspirators knew the game was up. They had no choice but to surrender, their plans unraveled by the very people they had underestimated. Amara's heart swelled with triumph as they were taken into custody, their empire of corruption crumbling before her eyes. As they were escorted out, Amara and Elon exchanged a look, one of understanding, of finality. It was over. They had won. But even as the conspirators were led away in handcuffs, Amara knew that this victory wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. The fight for justice, for truth, would continue. And she would be there, standing tall, ready for whatever came next. Amara's battle for justice has finally reached its conclusion, but what comes next for her? How will the world react to the downfall of such powerful figures? Don't miss the next chapter of her story, subscribe, and let us know your thoughts in the comments below.